man. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And can you speak up? It's hard to hear you with that pity dick in your mouth. My name is Shahir Dowd.
And this is the only podcast about movies, specifically the film Deadpool 2.
Did you know we did Deadpool at episode 30, and we are at episode 160 now. So it's been it's 161.
I think it's 161. Let's check the math.
So it's been 131 episodes since we did the last Deadpool, and also just to note, 161 episodes.
We're wrong. This one is 162.
Oh, there you go. And what we've learned is I'm bad at math and general counting.
Look, I mean, I think it makes sense because we're adding one because we're going from Deadpool 1 to Deadpool 2, and I'm trying to logic my way out of this problem, and I don't think I'll be able to do it.
Well, and I also just want to say that we're updating our general data protection regulation at this point as well. So if everyone's listening in, we are doing that thing that everyone does.
Oh, and we're recording in mono.
Ooh.
We're trying to cut down file size. So if anyone notices a difference or cares, write us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com and let us know all of your audio tips and tricks.
I think we should, in the spirit of Deadpool, make this a very inside baseball kind of episode where we're only just talking about things that have to do with the podcast.
Well, I mean,
which is nothing.
No, there's a lot. Hey, there's a lot that goes on with this podcast. We are here in the Only Movie Podcast studios.
Yeah.
It is now 11. No, what am I saying? It's 10 o'clock in the morning in the year of our Lord, Friday, whatever date it is, and we're just doing it.
You see how boring that was? You see how boring that is?
Yeah.
I know. Well, we're gonna get into the movie with that in mind. Matt, how are you, buddy?
I'm okay. I was psyched. I got an actual chance to see this movie. Actually, not to go right back into our meta conversation, but this podcast and all you dear listeners who tune in every week makes it a real sticking point for me, obviously, to keep seeing films. Now, granted, we were in a little bit of a summer blockbuster sort of thing coming through soon, but we got a couple films coming up that do not fit into those
thankfully
general genre. But what I'm saying is, I really appreciate that this doing this podcast for all of you keeps me honest and keeps me going to the movies or seeing cinema in general. Because as we get older in our adult lives, we just start losing time.
It's funny you said it. That was actually going to be like one of the first things I was going to talk about was the fact that honestly, I don't think I would have gone to see this movie had it not been for the podcast.
Right.
Like I don't think it wasn't on my radar as something I got to go check out. And it's weird now because I was trying to think back of all the movies we've seen, which ones I wouldn't have actually gone to see had it not been for the podcast. And I think really, honestly, I would have fallen off the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Of course.
Like, probably around Thor: The Dark World.
But I dragged you kicking and screaming
to every single one. And I was like, oh, if it wasn't for the podcast, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I was like, it's kind of interesting thing. If it wasn't for the podcast, that this whole like massive global blockbuster event would have completely slipped past my radar. And I was like, oh, what would I be watching if it wasn't for the podcast? And it was kind of an interesting thought experiment.
I mean, it would have been your version of Harry Potter for me.
What's that?
Because I didn't see the movies.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I saw them all in one day eventually.
And it's funny though, like how irrelevant Harry Potter is to today, right? Like
it's really not though. You're looking at the Tonys, the awards. The Cursed Child on Broadway is that, and Mean Girls, and another play that was used to be a movie that I'm blanking on. They're all like the top like nominees.
Right? I guess so. I was thinking about Fantastic Beasts and how like that doesn't feel, you know, like it's like Harry Potter but it doesn't really matter that Harry Potter was a thing. And I kind of like that Harry Potter ended. Like it was like we're done. One and done, bang. But then of course they brought it back with Fantastic Beasts.
I love an ending. And actually, speaking of an ending, even before we get into Deadpool 2, because I doubt this is the end of that.
Yeah.
We had an email by Mihai, friend of the show, asking about a series that is one of my favorite things because it ended. Mihai writes, he wants to know a couple things. First, I know the podcast says it's about movies, but is there any chance we will get a podcast about Cowboy Bebop? He's heard us mention Cowboy Bebop, and he's just started watching it, his email says. And I think that is a, time permitting, I think that'd be an awesome thing to do, because that is one of the seminal, I feel like, animated television shows, still in my top 5 narratives of all time section
I would watch
in
that.
my brain.
I would totally watch that. I feel like I don't know a lot about like anime or, you know, like mainstream anime. I know like a little bit about the things that kind of make it into our world, like Your Name.
Yeah.
So I would be interested in like learning more. So I think that would work for me.
It's a really good jumping off point. It's how I actually started watching anime, and I've fallen off in recent years. But it's such a, it was between that and like some random thing that like didn't take off. And I was in like an old Hollywood video, or what were those video stores in the mall, the DVD stores?
Oh, like Sam Goodies?
It was like a Sam Goody or something like that. And I was holding one of Cowboy Bebop and one of some other random thing, and I just randomly picked Bebop because of the art on the cover was more interesting, and it took me into a like, and the other thing I later learned was just like a big pile of hot garbage anyway. So like I randomly picked the right one, and that's what got me into sort of good storytelling through anime. So I would love to do that time permitting. He also asked, is there a chance we will get a special episode with you two talking about your lives?
I feel like we do that anyway.
Yeah, I think we just demonstrated how boring that would be.
I don't think it would be that interesting. I mean, if you have specific questions, I think this would relate to like possibly how our work relates to what we do. And you know, we both work in the industry, and you know, things we've learned in the industry. If you have specific questions about our work, I mean, you can ask us questions about our lives as well. I just don't think there's much there to talk about.
Yeah.
But email us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod.
Yes. And thank you, Mihai, for the questions.
Laura also writes in, and I feel like now that you did 33 hours of the Marvel Cinematic Universe,
38 hours.
I have carte blanche now to like make you watch whatever I want you to watch. So
I don't know if I'd go that far, but I'm in the mood.
Yeah, really? Yeah. Why wouldn't on the podcast? Why can't we now not do other things that are long form?
Oh, we 100% can. Oh no, I'm sorry. No, but keep in mind, I watched those films. You didn't watch those films in order.
But hang on, you watched them for a repeat. As a repeat, I did watch them for the podcast.
Not all of them in the beginning.
No, but I have seen them all.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I was like...
Continue your thought. What are you thinking?
So Laura asked us if we could do the Before trilogy, which would be three movies by Richard Linklater, which I watched last year, and they were probably the best thing I saw last year. So I would be totally down to watch that and talk and think about that again. And there's a lot of... the Cannes Film Festival just announced their awards this year. Hirokazu Kurita won for his film Shoplifting, which is really exciting because he's one of my favorite filmmakers right now. So to know that his work is out there, and there's a new Japanese Blu-ray release of all his work coming out soon.
Oh, nice.
So I would be really interested in doing that, a Kurita retrospective at some point. If you have any other requests, Laura has requested films for us before that we are failing to fulfill, but we do appreciate you sending us the requests because we do have them on a docket. We have a document here that has all of those in, and so we know we've got to get to Carol. We know we've got to get to Inception. We know we've got to get to the Before trilogy as well. So we are going to get through all of these eventually. Maybe we have to release a side project or something like that. I don't know.
I mean, I don't think we needed to do a side project. We just release bonus episodes when we have time to record them. And I think everyone's been so good about asking for these requests, and we just haven't had the time to do it. But we will. We will talk about all of the things one day, perhaps. Once some things settle down on all of our parts.
Until then, we're gonna go to the movies and we're gonna see Deadpool 2.
Hey!
And I think it is actually fun revisiting Deadpool, given that it was. I think I went back and listened to our episode 30 on Deadpool, and I was like, I feel like there was a tone of civility about that episode when I listened to it, where I was like, oh, I think this is the point at which Matt and I kind of started realizing we have differences of opinions that we're not going to change each other's minds about, so we're just going to like state our own opinions and try to basically say what we want to say without getting into too much of a heated argument. That of course, there are plenty of cases where we get into heated arguments, but this was one where there was like an air of civility, knowing very clearly that Deadpool was not something I was super into. But in fact, if you listen to that episode, I think overall liked the film. I just had issues with it. So it was an interesting episode to go back and revisit. And it's interesting to come back to it now and see how we've changed and how we've grown.
If you'd like to see how we've grown, how we've flowered into the beautiful adults that we are today, you can listen to the old Deadpool episode 30 and then listen to this one, Deadpool 2. I think as far as our clashing goes, we go in waves, it feels like. where we'll yell at each other a bunch for a couple episodes, and I feel like we come down and we're just like, no, like I respect everything, and then something will be a catalyst.
Yeah, there'll be one phrase that will just like sit either of us off, where it'll be like, hey, no.
Yeah, and then that will be the touching point to escalate the next six episodes, no matter what the episode is. So we're like the ocean, is what I'm saying.
It's like a married couple, basically.
Yeah, that's fine. But speaking of couples and speaking of Deadpool 2.
Yeah.
I kind of want to, this is going to be a hard podcast to talk about things in generalities before going into spoilers. Okay. I feel like because I wanted to talk about the Wade and Vanessa arc kind of first, but that's a little bit spoiler-y right off the bat. Okay. Do you have any objections with
well, how about this? Give us the synopsis. Tell us what Deadpool 2 is about, and then why don't we kind of just give like general, should you go see this, should you not go see this, general thoughts about it before we get into really specific. And I think the specifics are going to be from the very get-go. So we'll just do general thoughts quick.
Shahir, you're very good at this. Have you done this 161 times before?
Barely.
Okay.
Here we sleep or drunk for most of them.
Okay. Foul-mouthed mutant mercenary Wade Wilson, a.k.a. Deadpool, brings together a team of fellow mutant rogues to protect a young boy with supernatural abilities from a brutal, time-traveling cyborg, Cable,
as teased at the end credit sequence of the last film. They fulfilled that promise. And this is directed by David Leitch, who directed John Wick and Atomic Blonde.
It's even credited in the credits of this film, directed by the guy who killed John Wick's dog.
Spoiler for John Wick.
Well, come
on. Matt, general thoughts. Go ahead.
Okay, so I think this film in general, I was real excited for the first Deadpool, but I think I fell in love a bit with the story of Ryan Reynolds trying to get it off the ground and 11 years and he being just the perfect person to play it, and then getting the chance to play it in X-Men Origins Wolverine and them butchering that. Yeah. And, it's just the whole arc of the entire thing, then the leaked tape. Yeah. Then they got funding, then they got $11 million, then they lost like $700,000 in the last like 2 weeks. So they had, or before they shot. So like they had to like cut out the big action scene at the end. That's why Wade leaves his guns in the cab. Right. So like there's a lot of like movie making meta shit behind this meta character in this meta film. Yeah. That I really latched onto. So this film, because, once you're not the underdog anymore, it's a little hard to sort of get psyched about anything in that same wheelhouse for me. Like, look, after the huge success of Deadpool 1, no one was thinking this was a gamble anymore. Yeah. And no one, and it was not treated with the same, like, oh my God, can you believe this is happening? Everyone's like, of course this is happening. This prints money. Yeah. So I wasn't psyched. I actually even forgot that it was coming out. I knew it was coming out in this sort of window of time, but I didn't really remember the date. Yeah. And it was a little bit, I was sad that I wasn't excited.
Do you think you're suffering from superhero fatigue?
Maybe, but my doctor says it happens to a lot of men my age, so I don't really want to give it a name.
Your girlfriend says it's not a problem.
It's not a problem because we're very much in love. Right. No,
because I've noticed this about you recently. I think after the whole 31 hours of the Marvel thing, you seem to have
38 hours, 17 minutes.
You don't want to seem to talk about it as much anymore. It feels like it's all out of your system now. And the fact that you weren't that excited about Deadpool was kind of
yes. I think I've gotten to the point, especially with Infinity War, that I've put a lot of weight and time, and emotional well-being is riding on the fact that this whole journey will pay off. Yeah. And it's the top of the first drop of the roller coaster in a weird way. I know that seems 10 years. That's a long ride up a roller coaster, but that's what it's kind of been doing for me. Yeah. And if the roller coaster goes off the rails, I've invested a lot of time going vertical for 10 years. Yeah. So I think it's more of to be honest, a bit of a nervous thing. Okay. If it's bad, it's going to not only be bad in the end of it, but it's kind of going to retroactively, like I said in our Infinity War podcast, check that out. It's going to retroactively affect the way I think about all the films. Right. Now, granted, X-Men, Deadpool, they are out of canonical Marvel stuff, and I think I've been kind of done with X-Men movies outside of Logan for a little bit. And Deadpool literally just makes fun of the X-Men universe. So I am a huge fan of parody, and I love when things are cut down intelligently.
Yeah.
And Deadpool 1 did that. And I think overall Deadpool 2 did that. I think Deadpool 2, even though it had not the sort of like underdog story, even though the co-creator with Ryan Reynolds of the first one sort of left mid-movie, and there was there was a little bit of contention, or I don't know if there was contention, but there was something didn't feel entirely right there. I was like, oh no, like, is this thing gonna collapse under, like, could it only exist as this like scrappy thing?
Yeah.
But I really think this film does Deadpool better.
Okay.
And I think one did the reason why I thought Deadpool 1 again worked was because they only used Deadpool really for like a third of the movie, and they cut back and forth, and they do a very, like, every time you're about to get too sick of Deadpool, they cut to a flashback or something else that happens, and it keeps you sort of invested and not annoyed at the character. Who the character's annoying, that's his thing.
Yeah.
He's Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
So this film, I thought they actually gave it more meat on its bones than just look how wacky Deadpool is around this generic superhero story.
Okay. This
is a story in Deadpool 2. Granted, how they get there might be questionable, but this is the kind of story, and I'm talking about not dialogue, story, plot, that X-Men movies used to be and should be about. It's about abuse. It's about belonging. It's about how people can be affected by their pasts, their persecution. There's a lot of sort of things in this script. And again, I'm not saying, I said the word about, that might be a little counterintuitive. There are tones of all of that in this script. And because it's in the X-Men universe, it makes sense to do that there. I think X-Men hasn't really done that since X2.
Yeah. Or what about Days of Future Past?
Not really. There's no, like, there's always like talk of like governments coming for mutants, but it's never like, it doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel visceral. It doesn't feel like you're you're watching a persecuted people outside of any scene from Magneto's past in the concentration camps. And even the way that they treat the character of Fire Fist, played by Hunt for the Wilder People's Julian Dennison.
My boy from New Zealand. Yeah, he's from my high school.
Everyone's from somewhere. It's literally replace Kevin Bacon with Shahir, because he knows everyone.
Everyone in New Zealand.
If you're ever playing that game in New Zealand, it's just Shahir Dowd. So, and it's less degrees. It's actually only 5 degrees.
Oh, it's like usually 2.
Yeah. Well, you're from an island. Yeah. So I think the way that character is treated in particular is like a super X-Men story. I mean, he's basically abused by the institution, by the people that are enlisted to protect him, and then Deadpool in this film gets thrown into it based around a couple other things we'll talk about later, and he now realizes that, you know, the system's a little bit fucked up, and he wants to rescue this kid, and of course in the Deadpool fashion he does it completely wrong. Awfully. Let's call it awfully, because I won't even call it wrong, because the things he does are things that highly emotional, not people that aren't looking at a giant macro picture would do. But his intentions are good, as most things Deadpool does. Weirdly, all of his murder and rampage, his intentions tend to be in the right place in the beginning. He's just nuts.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought that the undertones of a lot of that stuff in this film, even though they were undertones, they were poignant, and they gave me enough, or more, I'll say, of a grounding point to care about the actual plot of what was happening in a Deadpool movie, that way more than I did in the first one. The first one's enjoyable because it's fun and funny. This one is fun and funny, but there actually is something that it's doing under the hood. And I liked that. So, I mean, that's my sort of, I guess, without spoiler-ish stuff, my really first thoughts about the film.
Okay. So meta commentary here. I had a tough time with this movie because of one reason, and the thing that was tough about it for me was the exact same reason that it was tough in the first time I saw this, and it has nothing to do with the movie. It has to do with the fact that I went and saw it in the Dolby Digital theaters in New York, which is lovely. Really loud, really great sound, vibrating seats, you know, like amazing picture, very bright. But I walked in, and in the front row of this film was a baby. A mother had brought her baby who was sitting upright, sucking on a pacifier. And this baby must have been a year old, if not less, alongside her other child who was, a young girl who was probably like 7 or 8 or something like that. So we've had this conversation before about parents taking their babies to films, I don't want to be judgmental about that. I know how difficult it is to be a parent. I know how, people, I'm very pedantic about, the media diet that my son takes. So I'm, but that's me. That's a personal hang up of mine. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to ever suggest that, the way I do it is the way it should be done or anything like that. And I don't want to suggest that the way I'm about to say what I'm about to say is indicative of me, trying to tell people how to raise their kids or anything like that. But what it did do was that as this film unfolded with copious amounts of blood, with copious amounts of violence, with copious, I found it difficult to watch knowing that there was a baby in the front row that was being bombarded by these images. And it was a pristine print, it was at the Dolby Digital Cinema. So it looked amazing. It sounded amazing.
And in the front row, that baby's neck is just careened up.
Yeah, looking at basically a loud bombardment of images, which I'm sure they can't process properly.
No, but it's not comfortable.
But it's not comfortable. And the thing is even aside from that, I found the film to be kind of bombarding, and I got exhausted by it. So then whenever I felt exhausted, I was like, all I could think about was this baby in the front row. And I think, and again, this has nothing to do with the movie. The onus on the film to respond to this, there's no onus on the film to respond to this. But this happened right after the Santa Fe shootings. And I started, I think we have had a little bit of a conversation. I'm very interested in the relationship between media and public action. So I'm very interested in the way, in studies on the way violence in cinema affects people. And most of the studies, there's always a conversation here about correlation and causation. Most of the studies suggest that there is very little causation, which is the people don't tend to watch media and go, I'm going to go do that. There is correlations, which requires a dual party. Two parties need to come to the table and for causation to happen. And what that means is a person who's sort of susceptible to violence or has some sort of social problems sees something violent and then they do something. But a person who's not won't. So it's not really the media's fault. It's kind of it's a dual thing. However, when I look at gun violence in America and I look at the way in which we are having a national conversation about guns right now, and we should be, I think it's really important because I feel like this is my industry. This is the industry I work in, and it's the industry that I'm most proud of and I want to kind of celebrate and I advocate for, is that we need to have an internal conversation about violence on cinema. And when I see things like a baby in the theater, I can only think about that because I think it's problematic, and I think we're not having as much of a conversation about the way in which guns and violence are a real shorthand for something in films, and I think that's a conversation. But again, that's not this movie's fault. No. It's not it's not on this movie to talk about that. But it happened in the last screening of this I went to as well. Yeah. And so I was kind of just thinking about that a lot. And again, and I think part of maybe the response to that was I felt the film was kind of a bombardment of violence and a bombardment of gratuitous violence without consequence. That's kind of what the movie is about. So, that's kind of what this character is about. So it's just a sort of icky sort of territory where I'm like, oh, I don't want to suggest that you shouldn't be doing this, but I want to suggest that maybe we should be having a conversation surrounding this. I wouldn't ever suggest, for example, we should pull this movie from the theater or that you shouldn't go see it for that reason. I just think we should have a conversation about it, given where we are politically, the climate that we live in, with that in mind. Sure.
I think that the violence, and it's interesting, the violence in this film, and I would even say mostly in the first, weirdly enough, the first 10 minutes.
When the baby would have been awake.
Yeah, when the baby would have been awake. Yeah. And not being jostled at its seat by Dolby Atmos.
Yeah.
Is it's done for pure spectacle.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. There's other sort of violent stuff in Deadpool 1 that's done for pure spectacle, but this is where I'll say structure matters when it comes to just displaying violence, even violence jokingly or supposedly just at excess.
Yeah.
The violence in Deadpool 1, like when he's hunting down trying to find where Francis is, it's because Francis and his organization has tortured and is really destroying like every like horrible, like it's set up how bad those people are. And that in those cases when Deadpool was going through and sort of like even he was killed like with a Zamboni or something, like it's just it's funny, but it's also like, all right, these are all I've seen that these are all bad people, and for whatever reason it's a slightly different conversation, but I'm getting back to what you were saying. In this film, in Deadpool 2, it opens up with him just being like, I'm cleaning up criminals, and it's just a 10-minute montage of fucking death.
Yeah.
And I was just like, when I was watching it, I was like, fuck, I hope this is not what this movie is. And I felt like they got a lot of that out of the way in the beginning, and then there's sort of like any other violence is not just like action scene violence. It's like a parachute going into a wood chipper or like some like it's so like I guess my point is I don't think you're 100% correct, and there is a correlation involved, and I don't think that this is just my opinion. I think that you can do this movie could have done exactly what it did and get the exact same effect, having lost a lot of the fight scene gore.
I think what I want to do here is say that there's nothing in the film that is necessarily wrong. I just think that there's a conversation to be had around this.
Right, that's what I was doing. I was having the conversation.
No, but I guess what I'm saying here is that we don't have to dissect this film to have that conversation.
Oh, of course.
You know what I mean? Like it's a broader conversation about the way in which violence in cinema permeates our society and can affect just our kind of thinking about it. You know, in much in the same way that we should be having a conversation about pornography in society and the way pornography kind of permeates our culture in terms of the way we look at gender normalization. I think that's a broader conversation. It doesn't have to happen specifically about this film.
Yeah, and I also think, and we're going to get into a little bit more of this. This is definitely a touch point in this film and in cinema in general. There's another touch point that I'm going to get to later when we get into a little bit of spoilers about sort of how the structure of the actual story works in this film. That is again another thing that I think is problematic toward the way we look at certain people and characters. And so I think that there's just there's stuff to be talked about that we cannot get to obviously in a Deadpool. So bring it on back.
Sitting that aside, I will say this. There is a scene up front that happens in this movie that really just put me on the back foot for almost the entire film. Yeah. And it's something that you're alluding to as well.
Yeah.
And it was a case of just being like, oh, are we doing this story? Are we actually doing this? And it wasn't a case where I know I'm being vague about it, but it wasn't a case where I was like, oh, that's a bad story move. It's just that it was kind of a boring story move, and I was uninterested. And then the film kind of followed on from that. And I will have to say, while I think in comparison to Deadpool 1, I think this is a more ambitious film. I think this is trying to do more with that character, and I think it's trying to do interesting things, which was my big complaint about Deadpool 1, which is I thought he was a great character in an average movie. In this case, I think this is a more interesting movie, but I really can't say anything. And I tried to break down every single story in this film when I was writing my notes up about this. I would say none of the stories landed for me. No single story in this film actually landed. And I think there's a lot of different stories here, and I think they're all kind of interesting, but none of them actually worked. And it's one of those cases where I think this is one of those films where there's a lot of ball juggling going on, and they're trying to do a lot of things, but for me, none of them really worked.
I'm sorry. I'm being 11 years old. Did you just replace plate spinning with ball juggling?
Yeah, I did. I replaced plate spinning with ball juggling. I prefer to juggle. At my circus,
okay,
we
I'm
juggle.
Sorry. I'm the worst.
We can't afford the plates, to be honest.
I'm so sorry. That was the most juvenile bullshit I think I've pulled.
No. It is entirely appropriate for this film.
Okay.
So let me break it to you down like this. I think if you enjoyed Deadpool, and you sincerely enjoy the character, this is a film for you, obviously, because I think it actually does some more interesting things.
Yeah.
For me personally, I appreciate that it was trying to do more interesting things. I can't say any of it actually landed for me, and the things that didn't land for me in the first film kind of landed worse in this film.
It's like a worse superhero landing.
Yeah, it was. It was like the superhero landing when he lands and his knee caves in. I mean, I would say the comedy was there, and I sort of got it, but I can't say I ever really, really laughed out loud. I will, that's a personal taste kind of thing, but I find a lot of the sort of inside superhero jokes to be kind of like inside baseball, where they're not clever, they're just kind of pointing out the thing that's there. And I was like, okay, I get it. I can see how that could be funny. I didn't really respond to it.
Well, you don't enjoy the stuff it's referencing. That's like if someone made an actually legitimate, hilarious baseball joke, I probably still wouldn't laugh at it because I don't understand the structure it was built upon.
No, but it's not a case of not understanding. It's a case of just going, okay, yeah, I get it.
Understanding is the wrong term.
Yeah. Whereas, and I was trying to think about my response to like Thor Ragnarok, which I thought was genuinely funny. And I think the reason Thor Ragnarok was genuinely funny was because it undermined what we understood about Thor as a character. And I thought that was funny. It was basically underplaying what we understood. And whereas this was kind of just pointing out the things that were already there. And again, I can see how that would be funny. My audience did laugh a lot. I just kind of was sort of like, okay. Again, that's more of a me thing, not the movie thing. Like people were laughing. I'm surprised by David Leitch's direction in this film because I saw John Wick over the Christmas break.
Yeah.
And the thing about that film was that there wasn't a film I particularly loved, but the action scenes made me sit up in my seat and go, oh, yeah. Okay, I get it. I get why this film exists, and I get what this film is doing. And I think the action sequence and the choreography and what that film was doing in terms of that was exceptional. And whereas this was a film where the action scenes felt kind of like any other action scene to me, like there was one that I thought was particularly good.
Which one? I mean, if it doesn't spoil anything.
No, it'll be a spoiler, okay. so I won't say it. There was one.
Call it out when we get there.
Yeah, that I thought was particularly good, but other than that, I kind of was like, oh, just sort of prototypical, fighting and chopping and shooting and stuff. So it didn't really land for me. And then narratively, there are three sort of central storylines running in this film that have to do with family and abuse and like getting over who we are kind of thing. And I think none of the three were done in a way that was either convincing or compelling to me. The first one starts off with a kind of really sour note, and the other two don't feel very developed. So that's a weird thing for me to say because I'm basically saying this movie does more and has got more on its mind. I don't think it kind of particularly lands, and I want to get into why I don't think it particularly lands in spoilers, but that's where I am with this film. And then,
gotcha.
And then there are a couple of things that put me on a back foot right to begin with with this film.
I either disagree with one or two of your three, but I don't know. We're going to have to talk about it when we get into spoilers. So let's do that now.
Yeah.
This would be where a music sting would be if we had a music sting. Spoiler Town.
Spoiler Town.
Let's talk about the scene. Let's talk about the back foot scene because it threw me for a loop too. Vanessa, played by the wonderful whose name I butcher every time, Morena Baccarin. Is there's a bad thing that happens in the beginning of this movie. Basically, after Deadpool goes out and slays all the nameless goons, they have a nice funny back and forth, and then they're talking about the possibility of having children together, which I thought, and Jamie pointed this out too, and I liked this. It wasn't the typical masculine like oh, I'm not ready for this. Like they make a joke about like,
which is my life.
Yeah, but like, do you know what I mean? Like it was nice to see a character, a male superhero character, psyched to do it, and then one of the goons followed Deadpool home, and to the best of his ability, he tries to protect Vanessa, but he fails and she gets shot. And we kind of you get that a little bit alluded in the beginning because there's a joke with Hugh Jackman and Logan dying. And he's like, Logan died first. Well, now I'm going to die in the beginning of my movie and blah, blah, blah. So
he's committing suicide, and we presume it's because Vanessa is not there anymore.
Yeah. And you assume that in the beginning, but then you kind of jump into exactly how and why she's not there anymore.
Yeah.
And she dies. And then it goes straight from that death into a Bond movie-esque opening that I was like, what the fuck? Like, it wasn't enjoyable or fun anymore. It was okay. So there's two problems. One, I really like the character, so and because it went right into a silly opening that was basically poking fun at the death, like the credits even in the beginning for the people were like brought to you, or like it was like, wait, did they really kill her, like like in the titles and things like that,
which comes across slightly like, look what we're doing kind of thing. And I think that's part of that humor problem that I had, which was I was like, I don't think that's funny, like and not because killing her is wrong, I just don't think it's very funny.
You know I think there's a definite and I think that could be solved honestly in the edit. In a weird way, if they had the footage to sort of get around it, because this is a complicated cinema issue.
Right.
Yes, let's talk about the easiest thing to pick apart. The tone shift between Vanessa dying and the Bond opening credits with Deadpool sticking his ass out wearing high heels. That's fucking bad. That's just bad editing and bad pacing to get you through there. Because I was like not in the mood to laugh.
Right.
Like, and they go right back into this thing with the Celine Dion song playing behind it. And it was just, it did put me on the back foot, like you said it did for you. And then the film fought back to get me back. But like, I feel like it lost a good 15, 20 minutes of pure enjoyment for me as I steadily climbed back.
And then let's talk really fundamentally about Vanessa's death and what it means, which is, like obviously the trope is that we need to put Deadpool in the worst possible scenario in order for him to fight back and regain his humanity again. And Gail Simone is the author of the famous fridging article, women
in fridges.
And she's even said that she doesn't actually think that this is a case of fridging because of something that happens later on in the film. But besides all of that, I just thought it was boring. You know what I mean? Like I just thought it was a boring way to start your movie, and it was uninteresting, and I didn't. And it's like, and I was like, oh, this is the thing you want to do here? And I was like, oh, okay, fine, let's do this. But I was like, it's just boring, and I don't care. And like it kind of shows it starts you in a way that feels pretty tropish to me and like uninteresting. And I was like, you're really going to have to work to earn this back. And I don't think the film earned it back to me. And I just want to like really say when the movie opened and he's, trying to commit suicide and the song I'm All Out of Love by Air Supply is playing, I was actually interested there because I was like, oh, maybe Vanessa left him.
Yeah.
And maybe Vanessa got tired of his shit and left. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting story. And I think that would be an interesting film. But then we find out she dies just in kind of typical sort of action movie woman needs to be sacrificed in order for male to hero to have a journey. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, here we go.
I have more of a problem with the trope than I do being bored by it.
Right.
I think that, and this film, because we're already into spoilers, because there is a time travel component, things are righted by the end of the film.
Yeah. And
it's I'm going to call it an interesting narrative device to make it so that this is not a women in fridges scenario. The weird part is, you are right, Shahir. Deadpool could have gone on that journey of basically the story after that is like he wants to find meaning in where his life actually, it's sort of framed around this thing where he kind of sees her in the afterlife-ish type thing, but he can't reach her through this invisible wall because he hasn't found where his heart's supposed to be, or some like, cryptic sort of metatextual nonsense MacGuffin thing. And he first thinks he needs to be of service and finally join the X-Men, which is hilarious on its own. We can talk about that later. And then he finds out that on one of the missions that he messes up that this kid, Fire Fist, might be the thing that he needed to sort of, complete himself or complete his journey, or like make him a better person by saving this person who's abused, much like he was, etc. And you could have done that without Vanessa dying. I think but this now, God, this is the other side part. Again, I feel like it was done sloppy.
Yeah.
But and this is actually kind of a franchising issue minorly as well. Their love story, quote unquote, like both Ryan Reynolds and Marina, their chemistry is amazing. I believed that they loved each other in a real silly movie, and Vanessa was a fan favorite of like kind of keeping Deadpool from just being the film, being a male garbage fire. Like she was a developed character, and then they just kill her.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm all about figuring out ways to make your completed hero's journey hero have to go on another journey.
Yeah.
I think, as this movie calls out on a couple different things, that's just lazy writing.
Yeah.
And that brings me into something that will come back throughout all of the topics of this film, because it's so, when writing out my notes for this movie, I was kind of thrown into a bit of a feedback loop overall.
Yeah.
How does one, either from a narrative perspective or just a completed piece of cinema perspective, accurately review a film that in its parody is basically reviewing itself?
Yeah, it's the meta commentary makes it very difficult to poke holes at it, because it's poking holes at itself the whole time.
Like it's literally like the holes we would poke are already empty, and our poking device is kind of like, what the? I'm not doing
stab
anything.
It with a pin that we've kept in our prison pocket.
Yeah. So like, what do you think, Shahir? How can we do this, or should we do this, or how does it work?
There's a real simple way, which is that, did the movie connect with you? Did you find it engaging in any way? And like that has got nothing to do with its meta commentary. That has got nothing to do with the way it structures itself. That has got to do with, like, does it work? Does the movie work? And I think what I'm getting a sense of from you is that the movie eventually worked.
Yes, it fixes itself by the end through the use of this metatextual commentary.
I will say, for me, the metatextual commentary, and then a couple of things to do with the power sets of this character, make it hard for me to be engaged in this film. Plus, it starts with this trope that I find kind of boring.
Yeah.
And then the comedy is sort of not clever comedy, but just kind of like pointing out the obvious thing.
I would like to point out, this is where this is the one thing I disagree with. I don't think the comedy is not clever. I think it's very clever. It is outside of your wheelhouse of what you enjoy, not what you understand, what you enjoy, because comedy is subjective. I think it's clever. You think it's not.
I will acknowledge that comedy is entirely subjective here, but I will say that I know comedy, and I think this was a case of comedy being more a case of like pointing out things that were in front of it. So like saying Thanos, take it easy, Thanos, is to me kind of like not a very funny joke.
Well, it's a throwaway joke.
It's a throwaway joke.
It's not the thing that's going to be a knee slapper.
And there's a lot of those kinds of jokes in the film for me. So when your comedy is kind of that, predominantly that, then I'm kind of like, okay, it's that kind of comedy. But it's in a similar way to like. I'm trying to think. I saw The House recently, the Will Ferrell film, and a lot of the comedy is kind of just like absurdist, kind of like, these are the things that are in front of us right now, and it's like, okay, it's mildly funny. It's okay.
Sure, but again, I do take now there's going to be one of those clashy moments. Yeah. I take umbrage with the fact that you said in the same breath, comedy is subjective, but I know comedy. Like that. I'm
saying that because you're suggesting that because I don't care about these characters, I don't understand.
No, I took back that I said understand. Understand was the wrong word. Okay. And I was saying it's not in a wheelhouse of something that you enjoy. Therefore, the smaller, more referential, and I'm not saying you don't get the references.
Here, let me put it this way, then, because I think what you're saying is, if I really loved Thanos and Avengers and that kind of world, then I would find this funny. And what I'm saying is, you can love Thanos and those worlds, or and not find this funny, and find it kind of like mildly amusing.
It's weird. I'm half saying that. I'm sorry we keep going back and forth. I'm not saying that this is the most hilarious joke because I understand who Thanos is, and I think it's funny that Deadpool in a movie that's about superheroes knows who Thanos is.
Yeah.
These are all sort of, if I was going to sort of chart the path of sort of a comedy in a scene of Deadpool, there's a lot of little ticks of referential shit, and then an actual funny occurrence that probably has nothing to do with any of those things. And what I would honestly equate that to is sort of riding a little bit of a wave of like, oh, chuckle, oh, that's okay. Like, and I'm not saying I laughed out loud at a lot of these things, but like there's a different sort of level of like keeping momentum for a joke going.
Right.
And all of those small moments, if you are interested in the material in which they are referencing, will keep you and make even the bigger jokes that aren't even about that sort of shit hit.
So here's just my counterpoint to that, is that you can be interested in the material that it's referencing and not find it particularly hilarious. Like, for example, I love The Goonies. I love the fact that Josh Brolin was in The Goonies. When they say, watch out, One-Eyed Willie, I don't think that's a particularly clever joke. I think that's an okay reference point to what we're saying. And mainly, it's a reference point. That's my kind of thing, which is like, it's that kind of comedy that kind of like, and I think the to the point that you pointed out as well, when the film kind of actively pokes hole in itself about it, like that's lazy writing, or what, did you just actually kill her? Those are moments where I'm like, oh, okay, I don't think even that sort of like acknowledging that the joke wasn't that funny kind of helps the joke.
No, I agree. I agree with that, but I think that's a different thing, because there's a difference between a clever reference and a good joke,
right?
And I don't think a lot of the references. I think they're not both the same thing in this movie, and there's so many of them. It's hard to like go through. I'll have to watch it again and sort of see if it sort of lives up, because again, this is something I'll say straight up. No matter what your wheelhouse is in comedy, half of the fun of this movie is sort of trying to find all the fun little nonsense things that they put in, or like references you might understand.
Right.
Now, having seen it and knowing basically where all of them are, I'm wondering if the excitement that maybe I had about them, and it like in the moment of like that little dopamine hit you get in your brain when you understand a thing that like maybe not everyone understands.
Yeah.
If that's going to lessen over time, I imagine it would.
Do you think that the audience for this film like doesn't get all the Avengers jokes or the DC jokes?
I think a lot of them, they might not like the DC one, like, oh, you're so dark, is this the DC universe, which I don't think is a funny joke. I think actually in the trailer it's brutal, and in the film it's just okay. I think that type of thing most people will get. I think the hey big guy, sun's getting real low. I don't think people, even in Thor, a lot of people.
It's odd because that's the same joke that Thor did.
I know,
and it was like, oh yeah, okay, I guess we're doing it again.
Honestly, I would have cut that line out at this point, because they got to it first. That's just kind of how it is. Unless you were going to reference you referencing the reference, like do you know what I mean? Like, and that's something that would be very Deadpool. I just think that, so on average, I want to answer the question and then we can move on to whatever we want to. I don't think the majority of people will get all of the references. I think they shotgun blast you with a ton of references, knowing that out of 10 references, maybe the average person, and not the same ones, will get 2. And they're scattershotting their comedy to get all around. Now, is that effective for individuals? Possibly in the moment, no. Is it effective for I'm going to use the word, but I'm going to laugh at it after I say it. Society? Yes. Like if you look at all the data versus how many people got like they're hedging their bets. They're not betting like all their money on 13 Black. They're spreading it out everywhere.
Here's an easier way to do this. What's a moment that you thought was really funny?
I thought which kind of joke?
Just a moment in the film that you thought was really funny.
I thought and I'm going to get into spoilers, sorry, the Brad Pitt cameo was hilarious because it was so short, and fun fact, he worked for scale. He only made like $900 in the film.
Because David Leitch used to be his stunt performer.
Yeah, which is it's so funny. And again, that's a meta thing that I love about this. I also loved the build. This is a long joke to pay off, but the build, even from the trailers, of X-Force then just becoming a joke where X-Force is literally not like, it's X-Force for maybe 2 minutes,
right? And
they all die horrible deaths because they're not trained.
I think that actually is one of those jokes that would have landed for me if I was watching the trailers, but like I don't watch the trailers, so I was like, when X-Force happened, I was like, oh, okay, cool, and then they died. I was like,
they made such a big deal out of it. And then I think, honestly, is it Peter or Kevin? I can't remember Peter.
Yeah.
The Peter joke is one of the funniest things. I don't know why. It's the guy's delivery. It's the way it's a decent structure for a joke, but the dude's delivery between him and Ryan Reynolds is just so priceless in that interview room. And then the fact that he's just jumping out of a plane with these superpowered people.
Yeah, he's from the show Catastrophe, which I have not watched, but he's got a big fan base. That guy, Peter Delaney.
So there are moments that I legitimately laughed out loud. I actually, and this is, but then there's also moments that like I know when there's something that's good and effective and something where I'm fanboying, and by that I mean when I first saw Juggernaut, I don't think that's good or clever or whatever, but I fanboyed. I was like, oh my god, it's Juggernaut. Like I didn't figure it out quick enough, and then when I figured it out, I was so psyched. But that's not coming from a thing the film did. That's coming from the film showing me something I already understood. So there are different, I can differentiate my moments of enjoyment of the film between I understood that reference and what I legitimately think is funny or cool.
Right.
But I also get that's not a thing for everybody. It's not, and I don't want to say, like, I would never say to anybody, any of my friends, go see this movie, it's hilarious. I would look at my friend and be like, okay, what I know about you about this, and this, you might like this or you won't like this. Yeah. It's just, it's weird because it's so complicated. This is the dumbest sentence. It's complicated to talk about Deadpool too.
Yeah, no, but that's what we're here to do. I think, and I think I said this up front as well, which is that the comedy was more missed than hit for me, and I think a lot of it was it's not necessarily missed because it's also like on paper I get that this is the joke, but it wasn't like it didn't like make me laugh, and I think one of the tenets of comedy that's really important to make you laugh is to surprise you in a way, to set up an expectation and then to subvert it, and I think there wasn't a lot of that in the film. I'm like, maybe the X-Force thing would land better if the expectation was that I'd seen the trailer and I knew that X-Force was coming, and then the subversion of that was that the X-Force all died, or that you get a hero like Peter in there, and that's subverted. The thing about I guess a lot of that as well. I'm trying to think of What We Do in the Shadow, Taika Waititi's film,
sure,
and the IT guy in Taika's film. I felt like Peter was kind of sort of that joke and done less effectively. You know what I mean? Like I kind of just I read it and it was like, okay, I get it. It's funny. It's the same with the sun's going down. Like the sun's going down. Whatever. I was like, I get it, but I'm not like laughing out loud at it. Like I'm kind of like, oh, it's yeah, I get it.
I think those two jokes you just referenced are different. I think the correlations between What We Do in the Shadows and this, you're right, it's the same type of character and the same type of joke. I think the actors playing them play it differently. Yeah. And I like the differences there, like the subtle differences about how their characters actually interact in this basically fantastical world, and that's where the comedy comes from. Where let me ask you this, is there any moment in this film where you actually laughed out loud at all?
I can't really recall.
Okay, and that's fair.
Yeah. But I didn't, like, again, I didn't think it was like, oh, this is not funny.
Of course.
You know what I mean?
It was enjoyable.
It was just like, oh, okay, this is, what we're doing.
One thing when I saw it, I thought you would really like, and I'm sad you haven't brought it up yet, so I'll bring it up, is in the first film, Deadpool references like this, why is the mansion always empty? It's just you and whatever. In this one, he's in the mansion when he's becoming a recruit, and then he's like, where is everybody riding around in Professor X's chair? And then you just see one quick shot of all of the X-Men, the current generation X-Men, just slowly closing the door.
Yeah.
I thought you would eat that shit up for some reason. I don't know why.
Why would you think?
I thought in the moment, I was like, Shahir's gonna love that moment. And I was just like, because it was kind of a balance of movie knowledge of why we can't have all these characters in the same thing versus contracts versus all this shit, but also it's literally the movie, like it's the characters that are normally serious not taking themselves seriously, referencing a hurdle in the film industry.
I guess the thing though is that was a joke that was told in the first movie without showing everyone.
I know, but now you see everyone. I don't know. At the moment, I don't know. I thought of you in that moment. I'm like, he's gonna like this.
You know what? You know what the thing is about the comedy here that I was trying to think about, and it's hard to quantify this, but there's an element of trying too hard in some cases, and Deadpool has there's an air of like trying too hard a little bit, and this is a hard thing to quantify as well, because I was like, why does Thor Ragnarok work for me? Because Thor Ragnarok doesn't feel like it's trying too hard with the comedy. It's just putting up scenarios that make it work, and that's a really hard thing to quantify, but that's an air of what I was like, okay. You know what I mean?
And here's the weird thing about it. Deadpool, and I'm like literally making the movie and the character are making the excuse for itself. I'm just relaying it.
Yeah.
The character of Deadpool is literally the embodiment of trying too hard.
Yeah.
So like, even for instance, and it happens a little bit in the first one, but a lot of people, I was reading reviews of this film and they're like, oh, a lot of the jokes feel dated. The dubstep joke, the Age of Ultron joke, whatever, all these jokes. But Deadpool, and again, this doesn't help a general audience, but Deadpool as a character has always been annoying and has always been like 5 years behind and gets sort of like called out on he's referential, but his references are all old.
Yeah.
So like, it's this weird thing about like, well, the character it makes sense for, but the movie doesn't do a great job setting up why that is. And then if they did set it up, would it still be funny for the certain people it was already funny for, or would it just not be funny for anybody? And you fall into this weird trap of, because the film, again, pokes itself enough holes where it already looks like Swiss cheese, and you're like, well, I guess I'm going to put this cheese poker down because you can't do it. And I do like what you said. You're like, yeah, did it work for you? And I do think it worked for me for the majority of it. There are issues with it still.
Yeah.
I don't particularly think the Vanessa thing is, I mean, I'm glad they reversed it and they were able to go on the journey and still narratively fix that thread where I'm like, okay, like it's fine. But that's like the weird, like, that's even a meta story thing too, because like, is it fine because technically it never happened? Like, and
it's hard to, like, for me, it's hard to like invest in stakes of events in action when we ultimately know this is all, you know, this can either all be undone because there's a time traveling device in here, or that one of our characters can't die. You know, like, and in fact, two characters basically can't die in this film. So Domino. You know, like essentially, you know, like two characters just can't die. So it's like, it's hard to get that. I will say,
Zazie Beetz killed it, by the way.
Zazie Beetz is great. I love her in Atlanta, so you know, it was nice to see her here. I thought the scene that actually worked for me the most in terms of like choreography and action was her scene, because I was invested in like, oh, what is her power and how does it work?
Yeah,
and I love like seeing the sort of Rube Goldberg machine of like how luck works for this character, and I thought that was like an effective translation of her powers into an action scene. That was the one scene where, you know, I said up top, one scene that like really landed for me in terms of like action choreography, and that was it.
And I think the film, this is to the film's credit, when it has moments like that, it realizes it has moments like that, and whether or not this works for people individually, but it calls out that it has moments like that, because during this, they're talking about like, it's not even cinematic what your superpower is, and that it's the most beautiful shit you've seen.
Yeah.
And then even beyond that, they reference like the original, one of the original creators of Deadpool, and how he can't draw feet.
Rob Liefeld?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a power made up by someone who can't draw feet.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that were, again, there's a sort of and this is again not to do with this film, but it's symptomatic of like the way movies are made now. Is like is that there's a big CGI-ness of it all, and they even call it out when there's a big CGI battle.
Yeah.
But I was like, but I don't, you know, like,
but you're still doing it.
You're still doing it, and I'm still watching it, going, this is a big CGI battle that I have no interest in. Whereas in John Wick, a movie I didn't think was that great, had action scenes that made me sit up and go, I want to see where this is going, and I really am enjoying the choreography and the power of these scenes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like it's just tricky because in a way, you know, like what you said, where the film kind of disenfranchises your ability to poke holes in it. I think in a way it actually invites you to poke more holes in it because it's always poking holes in itself. And you're like, well, in a way you should know better. You know what I mean? Like for example, if you're so metatextual, if you know every pop culture reference, you should know that killing the female protagonist at the beginning of the film so that the hero can have a journey has a pop culture reference, and they don't.
And
you know, and they even the writers said, "Oh, we didn't know that was a thing." I was like, "Well, you kind of know everything else is a thing. So
why don't you know that thing?
Why don't you know that thing?"
And then, but I think they get around it, or they probably, again, I don't know, I was not in the writers' room, but they think they get around any sort of problematic things because in the end of the film, granted, it's post credits, they fix it, quote unquote,
but the fixing of it undermines the entire film. Like it kind of like it just kind of undermines what we're doing with the whole film.
So on one hand, you have a strong emotional, I'll call it epicenter that then causes a character to go on a journey and grow and do good in another character's life.
Yeah,
and that's good, even though there was a sacrifice, there was a bad thing that happened in the beginning. But then it all goes away. So then that doesn't matter. But the bad thing that we were all upset about doesn't really happen. So like it's this weird balance.
Yeah,
and I don't know if maybe even thinking about it. I think I like what you said. Did it work for you in a sense of that you enjoyed it or not? Because the more you do things like this, the more my brain works in weird binaries. So like if I think of a logical reason for A, I could probably think of another logical reason around it. And this film has been just a feedback loop of nonsense for me. One thing real quick before, because we are getting sort of near the end, and we can keep going if you'd like, but I do want to talk about Josh Brolin's Cable. And the only reason I want to talk about that is because this movie, and this all ties back to everything we've talked about. Cable is a shitbox character.
Right.
He was developed in the same time Deadpool was, but that gritty 90s garbage era of comics. And no one really...
heavy middle kind of feeling, yeah.
No one ever really knew what to do with Cable, so once they figured out what to do with Deadpool, they kind of threw him into Deadpool's comics as sort of like the straight man.
Yeah.
And it works because he's this weird, gritty, old school, masculine bullshit character from the future who has a tragic backstory and blah, 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 blah. And putting him as a foil to Deadpool works. What I like about this, and actually Movie Bob said this on his review, and I'm glad he did because it was resonating with me in the film as well. This movie knows that Cable is bullshit. It treats Cable like bullshit. Like it shows Cable the character. Like yes, he's at a cool force field and he has a big gun and like, whatever. But every time it gets too macho masculine garbage, the film itself cuts it down. And by the end of Cable's journey, he's still grizzled and stupid, but I thought even in the this is the weird thing to say, in the stakes of the film at the current moment, meaning he uses his one-time jump to save Deadpool.
Yeah.
It felt good to me.
My eyes are rolling in the back of my skull right now. That moment was like, oh boy.
I liked it.
Really? It was. You know what it reminded me of is in spoiler for Avengers Infinity War. So this is a hard spoiler for Avengers Infinity War.
So take some time.
If you have not seen Avengers Infinity War and you
don't listen to this.
Don't listen to this. But Doctor Strange gives up his he gives up the time thing to save Tony Stark.
Yep.
And what you realize as you're watching it is, there's a reason for that, is because he's seen the future and he sees how this whole permutation plays. When Cable gives up his time jump to save Wade Wilson, I was just like, wait, why are you doing the whole modus operandi of what because you think that this moment is like an example of someone doing good, you're going to give up the basically the entire reason you exist in this movie at this moment.
And this is, I don't disagree with you on a narrative perspective, 100%. I don't. I think if I was just reading the script, I would be like, huh?
Yeah.
For whatever reason, and I think it's probably because it has so many holes and it poked them themselves and like whatever, but like I liked that moment, and I liked how, because Cable is the typical over macho bullshit grit character that we're used to in comics, and because Deadpool is kind of the exact weirdly opposite, like he has the same level of violence or whatever, but he's excited to have a family. He's driven by like what I would say, weirdly enough, he's driven, and again, I don't agree with the death of Vanessa, but he's driven by like actual love, not just.
Isn't Cable driven by the same thing?
He's driven by revenge. Like if you look at both of them, and you look at the way they act, Cable instantly goes into I'm the fucking man, dun-dun-dun-dun-dun, and like really like, no, nothing matters but fucking doing this and raw. And Deadpool is looking introspectively as to, and granted they kind of undercut it with the sort of
killing of the guy at the beginning where he like jumps out of the window after Vanessa's being shot and like takes revenge.
That I was gonna, but the revenge is sort of the revenge isn't the interest. That's actually perfectly it. The revenge isn't the point of Deadpool 2, of his journey in Deadpool 2. He gets revenge out of the way in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
The journey that he takes after that revenge is done and how he lives his life is the interesting part that we get to eventually. Whereas Cable is we're watching the revenge journey we've seen forever. And it's interesting to see those two stories next to each other, because one is a story about moving on. I mean, again, I'm getting real up high for Deadpool, so I apologize for that. But one is a story about a character moving on, and one is a story that we've seen a trillion times about hunting for revenge. Yeah. And I like that they're both there, because I wouldn't have noticed Deadpool's as much if Cable's generic revenge story wasn't also present. That was where I was trying to get to.
Okay,
sorry it took so long.
There's an interesting parallel between these two characters.
So sorry it took so long. I knew I could get there eventually, but it took me a minute.
I think there is an interesting parallel between these two characters. I think they actually do play in an interesting way together, but I don't think their stories are resolved in interesting ways. For example, like Deadpool under basically rewinds time on his thing because we can now have a time machine, and so we're going to go do that.
Sure.
And Cable gives up the reason he was going to do revenge because of a sort of, he's in a moment that I didn't find particularly emotionally resonant, but the character somehow did, and I was like, why do you find this particularly emotionally resonant? You know, again, and this is one of those, for me, you know, you're saying that there's a parallel story, and I agree with that. I'm saying neither of the stories actually worked for me, and like the third story is Russell's story of like overcoming abuse and realizing he doesn't have to be this violent person anymore, or he doesn't have to take revenge, you know, and that's what Deadpool. I thought that story didn't land either because I wasn't like that invested in what is happening with him. I think, you know, that's that thing where this film is trying to do a lot of things, and I think in a way, if they sort of, I think if the film focused more onto like what is the essence of each of these stories, and let's make sure we play to the essence of what these stories are, then I think it would be a better film. An example of this, which is not a comedy, but I think does this really brilliantly, is Rian Johnson's Looper. Rian Johnson's Looper basically does almost the exact same three stories in this film, but does them compellingly and resonantly, and makes them all land. And I was like, These I see what they are. I think they're interesting. They're more ambitious than the first, but they don't land.
I think I 100% agree with the Looper analogy. I also do, and I've said this before, there is only so much weight you can staple to the structure of a film, and the more you can, the better a filmmaker, and it all works. I'm not saying Deadpool 2 is an example of this. I'm just saying in general for cinema, the more you can put onto the bones of a film and it all still works and functions, but the weight is still more and more and more, I feel like it's a better film because you're balancing more plates or whatever. What Deadpool 2 does is it has a nice structure, and then it just loads that structure with jokes as opposed to more meaningful stuff on that structure. And that, I do think, does make for a less emotionally resonant narrative.
And the odd thing is, you know, we're doing that sort of meta poking holes thing, is I don't think like being jokey is a problem either. Like, I think you can make it kind of just, if you just want to make it jokes, make it jokes.
Which,
you know,
I think they did.
But then what happens is that this sort of complicated story that they're trying to tell gets undermined. For example, Hunt for the Wilder People is a movie loaded with jokes, but that has a core storyline that really lands. You know what I mean? And I think we sort of get into this issue here, which is like, what is the function of this movie? And I think the function of this movie is to like take us for another round on the merry-go-round with this character.
It's a comedy that tries to sneak in, I think, some smart stuff. Whether or not it effectively does it or not, that is up for debate. That's what we've been doing for the last hour. Yeah. Hunt for the Wilder People, you're 100% right. That is a better balance of comedy and heart, way better than Deadpool 2.
Yeah.
But I think they just tipped this. I think if that was a perfectly sort of balanced drama comedy, then Deadpool comes in and puts his finger down on the comedy scale and just slams it into the ground, or the other scale, lifting the comedy up. So I don't know. Long story short, my final thoughts, I guess, is go see Deadpool 2 if you like Deadpool 1. Also, go see Deadpool 2 if you're interested in any of the things we've talked about, because I'd love to hear other people's opinions as well on how this worked or did not work for you, because I was worried we wouldn't have a lot to talk about with Deadpool 2.
We talked about a lot.
And I think and again, it is, we do this a lot with films. The conversations the film opens up are a lot more interesting than the conversations about the specific film. And I might even backtrack a little bit and say, this is kind of a weird balance of both of those, because we're talking about things and issues with cinema in general, but also with the idea of how we relate or review or discuss things that are already rating, reviewing, or discussing themselves.
Yeah.
So I would say it is I enjoyed it, and I think it is an interesting film experience, but it is not going to most likely, unless you love the characters or whatever, have an incredible emotional resonance with you. It'll be like having a good mid-tier meal and then going about your day.
Yeah. And again, you know, I started this up front, which was that the thing about Deadpool 1 was that I thought, again, he was a great character in an average movie. And what I really appreciated in this was that they tried to do a more complicated movie, or a more ambitious movie. They had things on their mind, and they are trying to play it. I just personally think that ultimately, for all the sort of whiz pop bang that this film kind of throws at you, none of it I can sort of convincingly say actually landed for me. And and you know, and that's how I walk out of this movie going, you know, that was there, it existed, but I'm not like in love. You know, I'm not kind of fallen head over heels in love with it. You know, whereas, you know, for example, Thor Ragnarok is a film that I didn't expect to like, and was surprised by how funny it was and how much I enjoyed myself in that movie. And I didn't quite have that same sort of level of enjoyment here. Now, that comes down to a lot of mechanics, and it's very hard work to like balance what this film is trying to do. It's basically, you know, like it's kind of trying to do Looper, but with jokes, and make all the jokes funny and make the emotional stuff actually work. And maybe, you know, I've said this a few times on the podcast, the ambition of that is enough, because, you know, like that is a kind of thing that we don't see a lot of in movies. But you know, like ultimately, if I'm telling, you know, like whether to see this movie or not, you know, the case in point here is like, I think I would show my wife Thor Ragnarok because I think she would actually laugh at that. I don't think she would laugh much at this.
Fair.
Or get much out of it.
Well, at the very least, at least Ryan Reynolds got to fulfill his dream of shooting the original X-Men Origins Wolverine Deadpool multiple times.
Gotta say, Ryan Reynolds. You know, what more can you say about the guy?
Followed by shooting himself in the face after seeing the Green Lantern script, which actually WB responded to.
Oh, really?
They said, hey, Varsity Reynolds, we're going to need that ring back. And then he fired back with something fun. Oh, no, it was just a funny, like, exchange.
Yeah.
Anyway, this has been the only podcast about Deadpool 2. We did it without doing a lot of meta stuff about ourselves.
God, yeah, we should have been talking about maybe our... Did we do a Logan episode?
We should have referenced a lot of our Logan episode. Jirah should pop up at any point.
I was trying to get him. I was actually working with him last night.
Were
I was
you?
Trying to get him to.
Jirah, you'll have a 2-second cameo.
Yeah.
Somewhere in here. You won't notice, but because much like Matt Damon as the
he
hillbilly,
was actually already here. Yeah.
Yeah, he was here. You just didn't notice. Yeah. Shahir, when you are not fiddling around with a holy structure by trying to put more holes in places that holes already exist, where can folks find you?
You can find me on my holy website, www.shahirdaud.com, SHAHIRDAUD. Matt, when you are laughing at referential jokes that are funny, where can people find you, Thanos?
You can find me balancing the universe over at MATTHEWKROL.com for my life and works. Also, Skeletor, the number 4, PREZ on Instagram, or Emperor MSK on Twitter. By the time this drops, Shahir, it'll be 2 days before I can actually talk about my new project that I've been working on.
You can't talk about that yet?
I can't talk about it.
Christ.
Oh, wait, can I?
Yeah, you can.
I guess I can, because it was announced. Okay, I'll back it up.
Yeah,
I'll back it up. It was actually announced. So I have been tasked by the wonderful people at Extra Credits. It's an amazing YouTube channel that I've worked with on a couple different things for a couple years now. I have been gifted the role of showrunner and narrator of all of their upcoming videos, and they're amazing videos on highbrow gaming content, all drawn beautifully by the staff artists over there and some guest artists, and they talk about a lot of really interesting stuff about games. They have a whole history series, which is one of my absolute favorites. I'm learning so much right now. They do Extra Sci-Fi, where they break down the history of all that stuff, and there's a couple other shows just coming down the pipe that I'm really excited about. So I've been working really hard with the gang over there, and it's something I'm really pumped about, and I hope that everyone will go check out Extra Credits if you already have not. It is a wonderful thing, and I am truly honored and psyched to be dropping my first episode in 2 days.
Wow.
It'll be, I think, 10:30 Pacific Standard Time will drop on their YouTube page.
What's
for
the
my
episode
first.
about?
It's about blockchain. Have you heard about blockchain?
I am an investor in blockchain.
There you go. So it's the technology behind Bitcoin, but how we can use it for video games in creative ways and not just like mask it.
We should like create a blockchain just for the Only Movie podcast.
We should make Only Movie Podcast coin.
Yeah.
And then make lots of money and then reference how we did it before the bubble burst.
Yo, I think the bubble's bursting.
Did it? I mean, everyone has a coin.
Every time I look at it, I'm like, oh boy.
Anyway, we will. So that's what I've been working on. Please check it out. And yeah, I guess at this point, we will see you next week.
What are we going to see?
We can see, well,
let's go into the future. Let's
go into the future. But I do have to say, there's a 50-50 chance that the film we're going to be seeing, my expectations are already so low.
Let's just forward in time. Yeah, I saw it. It wasn't good.
We'll see you next week,
Bye.
which will be the following. No, it's back. Rewind.
Wait, I'm lost. I can't get back.
Oh, man. Can't wait to see Solo, though.